Hey Mbali, Kanye, and Andiswa. I am here to first of all congratulate you on your first songwriting process, if I'm not mistaken. It's been such a pleasure to listen to your work and to see the potential as to where it can go. And I hope you've taken your feedback from me well and are working quite nicely on the tracks. I thought at this point it would be quite wise to tell you all about what it means to commit plagiarism. Big word and a big concept, actually. It's because it's very important, and that is why I'm telling you. So basically, what plagiarism is, if you don't know yet, plagiarism is when you take someone else's work and claim it as your own. And this is a term generally applied to literally anything that any field where this kind of stealing is possible. For instance, if you take going to university and writing reports at universities, there's generally, and I know this because of my university, generally when you're busy writing a report and as part of the submission process, before you make the final submission, you need to go through a process of putting that work electronically through plagiarism detection. And how this works is it scans through your work and detects whether you've plagiarized and how much you have plagiarized. And if you go over the limit, because it is human to take from other people's work, and it is human to sound like someone else, and that's why there's a limit. So if you go over the limit of, let's say, 14%, which is what it was at my university, then you will officially be considered, your work will have been considered as plagiarized. And I'm explaining this analogy to you because that is pretty much how it works with songwriting as well. Now, I'm not saying that if you use someone else's work and you don't quote it or reference it literally with words in your song, that's plagiarism, or that is songwriting plagiarism. But the same concept applies. So when someone plagiarizes in a song, they take someone else's lyrics and melody and harmony and puts it into their work, maybe modified it a little bit, but basically it's very evident to the audience that it sounds a lot like someone else's work. And without any agreement with the artist themselves, and this is where the analogy of the text reference comes in. If you haven't made an agreement with the artist to kind of make it sound like the work, or you haven't, and this agreement will include maybe either just getting literal permission from the artist, but usually when it's a big hit, then it comes to the point of giving that artist a certain amount of the income that comes with your track from playing it everywhere, whether it's streaming it on Spotify or Apple or playing it in commercials. So that agreement usually amounts to giving them some of the profits that you've made. So unless you've done that, then you are in for legal trouble. And we don't want you in that position. So this is why we're talking about this. And we're talking about it because, unfortunately, because the world is in a place where we're running out of ideas, right? Everyone's work is sounding like everyone else's. And because we're in that space, it is very easy to sound like someone else. And that is why there's a fine line. You can be heavily inspired by someone else's work. In fact, inspired by a combination of works, but it can sound like someone else's and you can be accused. And it is up to your word to be able to argue that you have, in fact, written this by yourself, out of your own head. Yes, maybe by inspiration, but out of your own head. I also wanted to explain another concept to you, which is called sampling. And you may encounter this term in the video that I've sent Claudia to show you. But to reiterate, or not to reiterate, or to iterate, basically what sampling is. And this has started like way back in the day. I think probably Bob Marley days. In fact, he's very famous for it. If you don't know Bob Marley is probably one of the most legendary ska artists, and ska is the term. And it's a genre that was originated in Jamaica, but basically, yeah, very legendary artist. And he's well known for sampling old tracks from old records. Now, what sampling is literally taking a segment, a little bit of a piece of electronically produced music and looping it over and over again in your track to create, the foundation of it. And obviously, I think in Bob Marley's day, which was probably back in the 60s or 70s, it was allowed. But now there are new laws that come in because people want to make money and people want to be credited for what they do. So it started with Bob Marley, but it's obviously been a trend since then. And I think if you compare it to your classical studies or your classical pieces, you will find that there are lots of composers that take from other people's work, either taking from other people's work or taking from their own work and plagiarizing themselves in a way. But plagiarizing yourself is probably not illegal because you're giving yourself the permission, but it's definitely not acceptable when you're doing it with someone else's work. Okay, but back to sampling. Now, as I said, with laws and making references in written text and the limitations of how much you can plagiarize, they're the same kind of laws that apply to songwriting. And these days, if you want to sample from someone, you can only take a certain amount, which as far as I know, and I should double check, but as far as I know, it's 3 to 4 bars of their music. You may go wild with taking those 3 to 4 bars and looping it over, whether it is the actual track's instrumentation or the entire track, or just a phrase of the track. That is fine. The problem comes in when you go overboard, and that is what is very important to watch out for. So I mentioned earlier about being inspired and running out of ideas. So the only thing that you can really do in this situation is be aware of these laws, but also your intent to create your own music and your own way of being relevant to this current world. And basically trying your best to avoid being in a situation where you are going to be accused for plagiarism. So in our very first lesson, when I asked you all to go and look at all the music that you like and the music that you don't like, I meant it when I said go and listen to many, many artists. And when you go through this process, you will find that you will obviously, be attracted to a certain few artists. So those artists you will keep in your playlist or your personal playlist or whatever way you use to archive your favorite music. And it's better to listen to many artists than one, because then you're less likely to be inspired by only one, and therefore less likely to be committing plagiarism without you even knowing it. So that is my note about this. And basically just, intent. The number one thing that I need you to remember is just have the intent to be completely original, take inspiration from many artists, not just one, and be aware of the laws. And so far, what you need to know is basically just that you can take 3 to 4 bars of someone else's music, but further than that, you are breaking the rules. Cool. I hope you've learned something. And if you have any questions, just let Claudia know and I can answer them for you, not ask them, answer them for you. Great. Have a lovely day, ladies. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you and your music.